This is Financial Fitness, and I'm with my good buddy, George Gammon. I have him to thank because I started listening to him on the way to work. I've got an hour and a half to work, and he turned me on to everything that was coming down with 3 simple, fast steps.
That are never simple and never fast.
Well, man, you are a rock star in the whiteboard videos. I mean, you really opened my eyes up. I want to encourage all of you to watch him, everything he does. But what I'm most impressed with is, like your father, what he instilled in you really shows. And maybe watch his videos and you'll learn about how cool that is. But you're passionate about liberty.
Yeah, I am.
That's so important. And what would you say to an audience that's just waking up? You know, I know you're passionate about it, so I just want you to just go. Just give me the fire hose.
We got to study history. And we have to understand that this experiment that is America was incredibly unique, and that we need to fight to preserve that for our future, but also the future of our kids and our grandkids. And like I said out in the speech when we were on stage, if you can have all the Bitcoin and all the gold and all the real estate in the world, but if you haven't got freedom, you've got absolutely nothing. And I think a lot of times we lose sight of that. It's something that should be a big wake-up call for everyone watching your videos, because I'm sure a lot of them have gone down to the grocery store and seen that maybe 10 or 20% of the shelves are completely barren. And that's just a reminder that it's not just from a financial standpoint, it's not just about money or the size of your portfolio, but it's about the stuff, it's about the goods and services. So if we have fewer goods and services and we have less freedom, regardless of what's happening with your portfolio, we're getting into a world where the standard of living is decreasing significantly. So I think most people need to be cognizant of that, but I think it starts with studying history. Going back to that presentation that I gave earlier, a lot of that was going back to Germany, a lot of it was going back to the Supreme Court decisions in 1905 and 1927. I don't think anyone really realizes what actually happened in the 1920s in the United States around, I'm trying to keep it YouTube friendly, but around this push towards let's just say a belief that there's people that are genetically superior to others, and those people who are inferior, the objective is to wipe out their genes, so that will make society benefit in the future, and we're taking away their freedom, we're taking away their ability to procreate for the greater good. And that was a result of what happened in 1905. But you've got to keep going back, and you've got to keep going back. And when you do, you'll automatically wake up to what's happening today. Because we've seen this movie before. We know how it ends. And it doesn't end well, but we have the opportunity to get off this road to serfdom and back on to the road to freedom. And that's really I think what's inspirational about the message is, if you look back again on history, you'll see in the 1940s there was a strong push in the United States towards central planning, because everyone thought that, hey, we can win World War II with central planning, so why can't we micromanage the economy? And then Hayek came out and he wrote The Road to Serfdom to push back on that narrative. And I think he was extremely successful in doing so. And then in the 1960s and 1970s, Milton Friedman came back. He did those college tours. He did Phil Donahue. He did Free to Choose series. And he really pushed back on that narrative that was becoming strong once again. This narrative that's, hey, let's move towards central planning, let's become more socialist, a welfare state, let's kind of break down the free market capitalism that we've had in the past. It's not the best approach to achieving a greater standard of living for society at large, and he just completely demolished that, almost single-handedly. So then we got Reagan, we got Thatcher, which were far from perfect, but is a lot better than the path that we are on, going towards a more centrally planned economy. So my point there is, although we've seen these cycles throughout history, and we've seen, even in the United States, we can go into very, very dark places. I think that you can also look at points in history and show that how we are going on that direction, and we got off. And so I think that if we could do it in the 40s and the 70s, we can do it again today if people realize that we're at a tipping point and get that sense of urgency.
Yeah, going back to the grocery store, Beef's up 57%.
Yeah,
Eggs are up
yeah.
40%.
Yeah.
Fats and oils are up 50%. And the CPI lies 6.2. It makes me mad
Yeah.
that they're lying to us. That's what I'm trying to. And if you'll, I'm trying not to talk too much because nobody wants to hear me talk. I don't want to hear you talk. But it's so important to understand the narrative of why it's important to own gold and silver, why it's important to own Bitcoin, not to get rich. It's to try to make it through the crap that's coming. Because if I can keep people from being part of the problem, they can be part of the solution.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And going back to the grocery store with the goods and services, I think hopefully that will be a wake-up call to people. And then especially when the administration, the central planners come out and try to say, oh, well, the solution for all these shortages, the solution for this inflation that you're seeing is just for us to print more money and to spend more money. And I think even the average Joe and Jane now is kind of seeing that subconsciously. They're going, whoa, time out. This doesn't make any sense. And like you were saying earlier, they kind of say, well, no, these people are lying to me. They finally realize that. I did a story the other day about how Biden, and I'm very apolitical. I dislike both sides equally. But with Biden, he came out in December 2020, and he said emphatically, there's several quotes in the media where he said there will not be mandates in the United States. And then 6 months later, boom, there you go. The same thing with Fauci. There's not going to be, masks don't work. And then a month later, well, wear 5 masks. If it's with, it's not just with Biden and Fauci. It's with Walensky. It's with all of them. How many times do they have to lie to us? How many times do they have to go back on their word? How many times do they have to contradict themselves before the American public wakes up and doesn't trust them anymore and stands up and unites with the message and the ideas that built this country? And I think we're getting closer. That's the good news. The bad news is we're on a very slippery slope. The good news is the further you go down that slippery slope, the more it wakes up the American people. And I do believe that if we all work together, with you creating content, with me doing the same, and with all these people out there doing whatever they can to move the needle, even in the slightest way, that we're going to wake up in 5 years, 10 years, and we're all going to be very proud of the fact that we were able to win and we were able to get us off that road to serfdom once again.
This has been on my heart. So I know that two-fifths of spending is stimulus.
Yeah. Well, look at those charts that I use. The household checking deposits. At the end of 2019 is at 1.2 trillion. Now it's at 3.6 trillion. $3.6 trillion. That's a staggering amount considering at the end of 2019 it was 1.2. And that's not a result of more productivity. Ironically, that's a result of less productivity. We're producing less stuff, less goods and services. It's just a result of this quote-unquote money printing, and through the PPP loans, through the stimulus checks, through people not having to pay their rent or their mortgage. This is the parabolic rise in the currency, and people think they're getting rich when they look at their bank statement. But then when they go to the grocery store and there's nothing there, it dawns on them, wait a minute, I'm not really rich because although my bank statement might have a higher number, I can't buy anything. And you hit on that point when you talk about the specific stuff that's gone up in the CPI. Mm-hmm. That's really the line in the sand for most people if you look at history. It's when they can't afford shelter, energy, or food. That's when they get the torches and the pitchforks.
I talk all the time about the book When Money Dies.
Yeah, right.
And
Michael Burry referenced that book a lot too.
The price of an egg. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like you say, it doesn't matter how much gold, Bitcoin you got. Mm-hmm. If you don't have food, and it doesn't matter. So, when does it break? And I know nobody can answer that. Yeah. I'm impressed with the way the Fed's been able to patch this thing out. So that's the most incredible thing so far.
Very good at kicking the can down the road. Yeah.
I'm going to get him in here. I don't need to be on there. So what is it, 3/5?
Well, there's no way to predict. You can just tell that we're getting closer. But I think that I want to encourage people to have a sense of urgency to try to do something now. You don't want to sit back and say, well, they can keep doing this. They're just going to be in this holding pattern for the next 3 or 5 years where, yes, it's kind of a pain in the ass to have to deal with some mandates, but my level of freedom that I've enjoyed isn't going to be destroyed to a significant degree. That's the normie talking, not me, because obviously they're omitting 2020 and what's happening now in 2021.
Friend and family member, Fred.
That's right. There you go. But I think that it's going to happen sooner than later. I mean, to give you a specific time, I would say within 5 years, because you have to look at what has created inflation and the policies, the government policies that have created what we see today. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, can they do less of this in the future? And the answer is no. But the further answer is they have to do more of it. Right? They have to do more money printing, which will incentivize people to stay home. They have to create more bubbles in the stock, or bigger bubbles in the stock market and cryptocurrency and bonds, and therefore people will think that they're getting rich. There'll be less incentive to go back to work, and therefore this labor shortage that we have will persist, and I think may even get worse. And that's going to lead to more shortages, which leads to more inflation of those things that we were talking about earlier that historically have pushed people to the brink, where they're getting the pitches, the forks, and the torches and the pitchforks. So, that they've painted themselves into a corner when the only thing that they can do is exacerbate the problem. That's really what I'm trying to say. So I don't think they can push it, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I mean, Americans, the good thing about Americans is although we are all human beings and at the end of the day we're hardwired to the same thing, I think our tolerance for the type of government shenanigans is a lot lower than the Australians, a lot lower than the Canadians. So that's why I'd kind of give it that window of 5 years. Could happen sooner, could happen later, and then at the end of the day it's just a matter of probabilities. There's no certainties. But that's kind of how I'd plan for it in my own mind.
Right. I've learned so much from you, how to beat the dealer. That
That's
mentality.
Right. Yeah.
Play the odds.
Yeah, it's all about probabilities.
And you can't play them if you don't understand the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just buying Bitcoin because you think it's going to go up, that's not good enough.
Yeah, you got to understand the philosophy behind Bitcoin. I think that's even more important than the price. And if you understand why Bitcoin is important from a philosophical standpoint, you understand sound money. You understand the principles of Austrian economics, and that takes you right down the path to freedom and liberty. And that at the end of the day, is more important than Bitcoin itself.
And you can make up your own mind. What do you think is going to work if you understand it? Because 90% of the move is in the last 10% of the time. And we're here, guys. We're right there. So it's really important to listen to people like George and Mark and the Economic Ninja and these guys that are actually looking out, for us, I feel. All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yes, sir. Y'all have an awesome day. Hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'll see you tomorrow.